The transport hub on Station Tertius buzzed with 1,000 different life forms, each more exotic than the last. In the corner of the massive concourse, curled beneath a discarded nutrition dispenser, lay something that most passers-by mistook for refuse, a dragon no larger than a house cat. His scales, once presumably vibrant, had dulled to the color of tarnished copper. His wings, folded tight against his skeletal frame, trembled with each labored breath. Around his neck hung a collar, intricate and clearly ancient, but covered in grime and the accumulated dust of a dozen worlds. For 3 standard cycles, the tiny dragon had tried. He'd approached the Zifrani merchant first, extending one trembling claw in supplication. The 4-armed trader had recoiled, clicking her mandibles in disgust. "Vermin!" she'd hissed, shooing him away with a burst of compressed air. The Koltari priest had been next. Surely a being devoted to compassion would help, but the towering figure had simply stepped over him, robes swirling, as if he were no more significant than a shadow. Even the Tyrellian doctor, whose species prided themselves on their medical ethics, had refused. "My oath covers sentient beings," she'd said coldly. "Not whatever this is." The dragon's name was Ember, or had been centuries ago when names still mattered. Now he was simply trying to survive one more hour, one more moment. His species had been ancient when most of these races were still crawling from their primordial seas. But age meant nothing without strength, and strength was something he no longer possessed. That's when Roma Katniss arrived. She was human, which on Station Tertius meant she was considered slightly mad and entirely too curious for her own good. Humans had only joined the galactic community 2 generations prior, and they were still earning their reputation, one bewildering action at a time. Roma ran a small barber shop on the station's lower levels, catering mostly to species with hair, fur, or feathers. She'd come to the concourse for supplies, her weathered hands clutching a list on an actual piece of paper, another human oddity in an age of digital everything. She saw him immediately, while 3 dozen species had stepped over, around and occasionally on the tiny dragon. Roma stopped. She knelt, her knees creaking slightly, and tilted her head to study the creature before her. "Well now," she murmured, her voice carrying the warm rasp of someone who'd lived a full life. "What do we have here?" Ember lifted his head, expecting another rejection. His golden eyes, dim with exhaustion, met hers. He saw something there he hadn't seen in the faces of the others. Recognition. Not of what he was, but of who he was. A person. A being deserving of dignity. Roma reached out slowly, telegraphing her movements. When Ember didn't flinch away, couldn't really, being too weak, she gently touched the collar around his neck. Her fingers traced the symbols there, brushing away centuries of accumulated filth. Then she froze. Her eyes widened, darting from the collar to the dragon's face and back again. Her hands began to shake. "Oh my God," she whispered. Then louder, "Oh my God," she could read it. Humans, with their infuriating habit of studying dead languages and collecting useless historical data, had catalogued thousands of ancient scripts from across the galaxy. Roma's own grandmother had been a xenolinguist, and she'd taught Roma to read High Draconic as a child, a language most species considered extinct. The collar read, "Ember Firefang, guardian of the 3rd realm, keeper of the eternal flame. Witness to the first dawn." This wasn't just a dragon. This was a primordial, one of the oldest living beings in known space. His species had written the first star maps, had mediated the first peace treaties, had welcomed most of these species into the cosmos, and they had left him to die on a dirty floor. Roma's jaw set in a way that her late husband would have recognized, a look that meant someone was about to receive a piece of her mind, whether they wanted it or not. But first, priorities. She shrugged off her jacket and carefully, reverently wrapped it around Ember's tiny frame. He was so light, bones like hollow crystal. She lifted him against her chest, feeling the faint flutter of his heartbeat. "I've got you," she said firmly. "I've got you, sir." The honorific made Ember's eyes widen. When was the last time anyone had called him sir? Roma strode through the concourse, and her demeanor had changed. She wasn't a humble barber anymore. She was a woman on a mission. She marched straight to the Tyrellian doctor's stall. "You will see him. Now." The doctor looked up, ready to refuse again, but something in Roma's expression made her hesitate. I told you. His name, Roma interrupted, her voice carrying across the concourse, is Ember Firefang. He is a primordial guardian. His species gave yours the technology for faster-than-light travel 4,000 years ago, and you will treat him with the respect and care he deserves. Or I will personally ensure that every human physician in this sector knows that a Tyrellian doctor violated the most fundamental principle of medicine, to do no harm. The concourse had gone quiet. Other beings were turning, listening. The doctor's face shifted through several colors. Primordial? That's impossible. They're right here, dying. Because every one of you was too busy, too important, or too disgusted to help. Roma's eyes swept the crowd, and more than a few beings suddenly found the floor fascinating. Humans have a saying, the measure of a society is how it treats its weakest members. You all just failed that test. The doctor's hands trembled as she reached for Ember. Bring him into my office immediately. As Roma followed the doctor inside, Ember managed to make a sound, a tiny creaking rumble that might have been a purr or might have been a laugh. Thank you, he whispered in high draconic. His first words in weeks. Roma smiled down at him, adjusting her jacket to keep him warm. Don't mention it. Everyone deserves a chance to have their story heard. Besides, she added with a wink, you clearly need a haircut. Those scales could use some buffing. Professional opinion. For the first time in a very long time, Ember Firefang felt something he'd almost forgotten, hope. And it had come, as the most important things often do, from the most unexpected source, a human barber who took the time to read.